Machika Tutawe. Let's begin. Our next speaker is someone we're still adjusting to not being here. Mr. Joshua Sutterfield has been here in Oxford for 6 years.
Oh.
Yeah. He was here long enough that I think Oxford started to feel like home for him. But he had that calling back to Oklahoma, so off he went. And Joshua is the Cultural Resources Officer for the Myaami Tribe of Oklahoma. He's filling the position. Many of you remember Julie Olds, who filled that position for many years. And so Josh is filling in some pretty big shoes. And so we're going to give him a chance to tell us a little bit about how he's doing that. So, anyway.
Anyway, Daryl, for that gracious introduction. Myaamaki nehe nika ninga tepewe nea lako kaoke wenzwiani mishikashia nila Myaamia mishikanakwa nehi labri awe makiki. Hello, my relatives and my friends. It is nice to see all of you. My name is Joshua Sutterfield, as he said, and I am a citizen of the Myaami Tribe of Oklahoma. Little Turtle and Big Leg are my relatives. As Daryl said, I am filling the shoes of Julie Olds. I keep hearing this phrase, you're the new Julie, apparently. Well, as we all know, Julie Olds is a crier, and so I'm actually feeling like I may actually be filling her shoes, because after seeing the young leaders, the students speak earlier, I don't know how anybody could have had a dry eye. So I feel like maybe I am filling her shoes. Today I'll speak about cultural resource management and its role in tribal education. You'll hear lots of things in this presentation that touch on, I think, all of the other presentations we saw today. I will begin by defining briefly what a cultural resource is, and then what cultural resource management is, and its role in tribal education, and then why we need to preserve cultural resources. I will then move on to examples of how it's actually used within our tribal education. So what is a cultural resource? A cultural resource is anything tangible or intangible that holds or may hold a degree of cultural value to a socio-cultural group. Cultural resources can be either physical or non-physical. That is, they are things we can see, things we can touch. Cultural resources are also things that we cannot see or touch. They are our cultural ways. They are our language, our stories, our people. Cultural resources are the very things that make us Myaamia. Those tangible resources are the physical things that we actually interact with. Buildings such as the Drake House are tangible cultural resources. Historic places and buildings become great tools to educate people about the history that occurred at certain locations. And these places serve as representatives of a time period. These buildings and places are priceless because they tell stories and hold cultural knowledge that may otherwise be lost. Historic sites such as village sites or places of burial offer us opportunities to visit the places of our ancestors. These physical sites are the basis for the National Historic Preservation Act, which aims at protecting historic places. These are the places that we have all visited or passed that sign on the highway, the blue sign that says historical marker 1 mile. And if you're like me, after about a mile, you kind of stop paying attention to the road. And if you're really like me, you never find it anyway. And then we have non-tangible resources. These are a little bit more tricky. These are the things we can't walk up and touch. We can't see them. They, again, are our cultural ways. They are our language, our dances and stories, even the manner in which we relate and interact with the environment. These are cultural resources. Although we cannot touch these things, they are an important part of the very fabric that makes us Myaami. So with that brief introduction to what a cultural resource is and the varying types, I will then now shortly talk about resource management. Cultural resource management is a term that archaeologists created in the 1970s as a parallel to natural resource management in order to address the types of resources just discussed. Other resources would also include things like shipwreck sites, museum collections, music, and arts. Cultural resource management is about preserving those resources that hold that cultural knowledge or may hold that cultural knowledge. Cultural resource management is about preserving knowledge. The knowledge of the ecological systems, ways of relating to one another, medicinal knowledge. It is preserving the history and culture of a people. This is why we preserve these resources, because they offer us knowledge. So once we've preserved them, what do we do with it? Well, we learn from it. We use it. The different types of resources offer different types of lessons and uses. Non-physical resources such as language gives us an insight into the past. Through language, we can learn about our relationships with animals, humans, plants, and other non-tangible items and peoples. We can see in the language that animals are animate beings, as well as many plants. We see kinship terms being used in the animal kingdom, the very same terms we use for human-to-human relations. This shows a connection between humans and animals that goes beyond hunter and game, or protector and endangered. The language can teach us about how place names were created and places referred. Mostly these are ecologically based, like the place of Flint, Wipikiongi, or Deer Lick, Walondekonenge. Rarely do we see in our language place names named after individuals. Language gives us a verbal expression of our culture. It is our way of thinking. It is our identity. The physical resources also offer us many things. Landscapes offer us a place to interact with the environment. They are the places where plants and animals live. We use these for food, medicine, materials for lodging, and other technological uses. We use different plants for different ceremonial reasons. These resources become our outdoor classrooms. Our culture is so integrated with the environment that one cannot teach about Miami culture without teaching about the environment. This is why it is so important to preserve these resources. When they die or go extinct, so does part of our culture. When we have these resources, we have teaching tools. When we can preserve a landscape, we are preserving that outdoor classroom in which we can then educate our community. We currently have a cultural ground that is 585 acres. This is where the A1 Zapata camp takes place. There's a nature walk there, and it also serves as a gathering place and other needs. On these grounds, we are able to offer our people a place in which we can use our language and our cultural knowledge. We're in the process of finishing and creating new nature walks in the trail system on the grounds that not only offers physical activity, but a path through a landscape embedded with cultural knowledge. There will be bilingual signs along this trail that identify certain ecological processes and the entities. We will have these signs that will have Miami words for these plant communities or ecological processes and those cultural uses that they may hold. This provides the walker with an opportunity to better understand the place of the plant within our culture. We will have open harvest areas where people can come in and harvest the plants for craft, food, or medicinal or other cultural uses. During our youth camp, A1 Zapata camp, the participants learn about many plants that they're sharing their environment with. They go out and harvest these plants. And it is during these activities that they would learn about our culturally appropriate ways of harvesting. This typically involves leaving some behind for the other inhabitants of the land, as well as leaving enough for the plant community to survive. The youth learn about relationship with the plants and how to maintain that relationship. Many times they learn about the use of sema, tobacco, which is used to show respect and gratitude for the nourishment of the plant that it provides, or for the technological use that it may provide. After the harvest, the youth then return to the camp and prepare the food, the very plants they just harvested. They learn about how we as Myaami people cook and what types of dishes the plants can be made into. This gives them a connection to the plant and the land that is very intimate and personal. If the plants were not there to harvest and interact with, then this activity simply could not occur. It is the physical interaction that really reinforces the relationship. If we simply taught in a standard classroom, as George was touching on, out of books, using pictures of these plants, the connection would not be the same. The landscape provides an opportunity for the youth to see where these plants come from, to understand that they're part of a larger whole. The youth see that their actions, such as harvesting, have an effect on these plant communities. They begin to better understand that human action has a major influence on the environment. They also get a chance to plant or even transplant certain communities. Many of you know that there's a type of corn, the white corn, that is specific to the Myaami culture, Myaamia. This is the white corn you see pictured here. The youth certainly learn of the importance of this plant. They learn how to plant it and how we use it in cooking and in other cultural ways. Having a plot to plant corn, once again, provides an outdoor classroom for us to teach in, but also a place in which we can express and participate in our culture, furthering and perpetuating our ways. I would certainly like to just say that it's been an honor for me to be part of the effort that does just this. For many years, decades, and longer, we have seen our ways diminish, decrease, and lose a place in society. Through the efforts of many which are here today, and the support of our leadership and community, we are in the middle of seeing our cultural resources once again find a foothold in society. With the aid of our leadership and community, our cultural resources are once again educating us and providing knowledge that we may use and pass down to many. I would like to say Mishi Mnewe, a heartfelt thanks to all of those individuals, and Mnewe to you. Thank you. Sure. Questions? I can certainly talk, that's for sure. I can keep going. I don't need this just to talk. I certainly was moved by the students' presentations because I did spend 6 years here, and I had many of the same experiences they did. Growing up, I wasn't really sure what it meant to be Myaami. I knew I was an Indian. I knew I was Myaami, but I didn't know what Nila Myaamia meant. I am Myaami. And it was through the interaction with the Myaamia project, which started actually the first year I came here as a freshman for my undergrad, and then moved on in the middle of still writing my thesis for my master's. And it was through that interaction that I learned about community. I learned about Myaami ways and language and how we're all related. Through that, I gained so many friends and relatives, and a little sister who's already left. Kelsey, my cousin, is now my little sister. And there was a spiritual awakening for me. Amy spoke on that for sure. There was a cultural awakening, as Tim said. Mine was a little sooner than yours. But it has been quite an experience. I'd also like to say Mishi Mnewe to Miami University for providing not only me, but all these others the opportunity to do such this. Are there any questions? Suzanne?
I have a question, and I know this surely is way down in the future, but I was sitting here thinking of my 2-year-old grandson, and I thought, right now there's no way I mean, I would love for him to have the experience like you're teaching these children and you go out to the fields and how to pick it and how much to pick and to actually prepare it and just the whole circle of experience. Do you ever think in terms of maybe down the future reaching out?
Yeah, the nature walk and the trail system that will be on our culture grounds. Sunday will be open to the public with a guided tour. There'll be hopefully, a walking tour as well. So when you come to a plant community, you'll see things such as harvesting methods, dishes, and the other cultural uses of those plants. And then, almost have like a script for the trail guide to kind of talk about those things, as well as telling the history of the place we're in. And it's an allotment, actually, of my great-grandmother, is where that is. So every time I go to the youth camp, I have a special connection to the place that we're having it. So there'll be that type of history as well. And then you could talk on the history of allotments as well. So and that is certainly something we'd like to teach others, not just Miami people.
And don't forget our camps. We go out and we harvest.
That's
There's
what
that feeling about what you have to try.
well, true, yeah.
I don't know if this is a question that you can answer or that somebody else can maybe answer, but I know that a lot of tribes have you have to be a certain percent to be actually considered a member of the tribe.
Right.
And I know that I'm considered to be a member of the tribe, but I'm wondering about when I have kids, how does that work within our tribe?
I can't answer that fully, but what I can say is it's typically up to the tribe to determine their enrollment. Some do blood quantum, some do not. We do not. Your child will be Miami. Dolph. Sorry, Mr. Davis.
Josh, I commend you on pointing out the difference in terms of how cultural resources have been viewed by savants, by archaeologists, that were non-native, who was originally established the definitions and so on, unfortunately. And the assertion of tribes' perspective, the nation's perspective on what constitutes a cultural resource, I think that's an important aspect of what you're pointing out. And I normally don't have a question other than when you're going to get your thesis done.
You have to say that in public, Dolph? I mean, can't that be an email?
Something possessed me. I don't know what.
Is Dr. Clack still here? Did you put him up to that? You guys are best friends now.
But you mentioned the trail system, and if I would direct people's attention to the second poster from the right over there that has laid out the trail system on the cultural grounds is laid out there. And,
Yeah.
the Institute of Environmental Science is working in partnership with the Myaamia Nation. We were able to lay that out. So.
Yeah, the trail system, I forgot about that. So, yeah, we thank you for that. Mr. Daniels?
Does your tribe have a religion?
The question is, does our tribe have a tribal religion? And I usually don't really answer that question because I'm not knowledgeable enough about it. I don't know if anybody else would like to touch on that, but with not having enough knowledge, I wouldn't want to speak to that. Dr. Clack? Don't ask the same question.
But Wes's presentation about the camp and saying, the goals are longer term and not so specific to language acquisition makes me want to pose a question to you. I know you're very new to your job, but any thoughts on how do you measure success in a cultural resource officer role?
Did everybody hear the question?
But because it's obviously so multifaceted, how do you know you're on track for what you should be doing?
Community response. When I'm getting those positive responses from the mothers and the grandmothers when their children come back from the camp, or the language labs, or the students here today, we know we're doing a good job. When when the leadership and the other people in the tribe are hearing about the cultural resource effort and asking for more, we're doing something right. Dr. Cobb, no thesis for you yet. I got all my thesis advisory here. I didn't ask them to be here today.
I have a question about there's an ancestral homeland, and then there's as many Native communities have experienced a remaking of another homeland, which is post-removal. Do you get involved in, how do you decide what's a cultural resource in your mind? I mean, is there an ancestral sense of what is a cultural resource, and then what is a cultural resource in a new homeland, or do you not even bother with making that distinction? Because, of course, northeastern Oklahoma is quite different
Definitely.
from Indiana and present-day Indiana and Ohio, the Great Lakes region. So in terms of plants and animals and the knowledge you take, what is it that's considered being a part of Miami from that point of view?
Do most people hear that question? It's kind of about maybe historic cultural resources versus current. I would say what the Myaamia project is doing now with the dictionary and all that is a cultural resource. I would say historic or current, if it holds or may hold a degree of cultural knowledge or value, it is a cultural resource.
My question kind of goes with what he was asking, like when the Miami people were moved to Kansas and Oklahoma, were there plans that you were able to take that were solely indigenous to this area that have kind of...
The corn made it, we know that.
Right.
Yeah, there's actually stories about our ancestors grabbing seed and handfuls of dirt as they're being loaded onto canal boats, against their will, unfortunately, and taking some of that with them. And then there was many journeys back and forth. So some of those plants did come back down. And there are some similarities. There are, Lanenge is down there, milkweed is down there. So there are those.
Are there plants or things that have been lost in that?
One of you two might, yeah, I was going with you on this one. Yeah.
Are there some, like on the trail over on Salmon Road that will be able to, that you'll be able to reconnect with?
Oh, I would think so. Yeah.
I mean, that would be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's why for those communities that are hurting now, we need to make sure and preserve them, because when they go away, so does part of our culture, and we don't want that to happen. Sir.
When do you have any kind of interaction with preservation offices? Kind of a follow-up to his questions. In Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, if they're doing traditional cultural resource management projects, they come across Miami sites, do they contact the Miami Nation of Oklahoma to discuss what to do with those resources?
The question dealt with our interaction with those other historic preservation offices or entities that deal with historic preservation, cultural preservation, basically outside of Oklahoma, more in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Is that sort of right? And yes, we do. The Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, if there is any certain federal undertaking, they have to contact us. Certainly if they find anything, but even before the project begins, if they're going to put a cell tower down, they have to contact us. We tell them if there's a site there. This is true of all indigenous nations. Yes, hopefully we also start building relationships with those entities that aren't federal, and so we have relationships with them. Hopefully they are going to be on the same mindset as we are, that they are important, that they are valuable. Of course, there are troubled areas out there for tribes. A lot of times you get you're not in my state anymore because we're in Oklahoma. So if you're not in my state, why do I need to talk to you? Because my ancestors are there. My blood, sweat, and tears of my ancestors are there. Miami people are still there. And we do run into that a lot, where, well, you're not here. Why do we need to talk to you? So it kind of goes both ways. But if it's a federal undertaking, yeah, they have to contact us. They sure do.
Well, they ought to contact you, but often they do not, because they choose to assert their own idea of who's affiliated, who's not. And that's one of the
Correct.
problems, is asymmetry of power between dominant society and American Indian nation.
Or who the authority is on that item,
Who the
even.
authority is, and I think that's one of the issues that you have in terms of state preservation offices, recognizing that there are affiliated, interested parties that no longer reside in the area. And so what it really speaks to is how substantive is the consultation in Indian country when you're doing projects. And if you have somebody, an archaeologist, making that judgment call, communities are not likely to be contacted all the time.
It's true.
You know that, Andrew. I mean, I'm not telling you anything new on that, right? It's just been one of the problems with the discipline itself.
Yeah, definitely. Other questions, comments, jokes? Anyway.